Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Which Handheld is Right for You? Today, we will actually have three presenters that will each be providing an overview of one of our different handheld devices. In order of appearance, we will have Jeffrey Pystrak, the product manager for the i1 family, Christian Benz, the product manager for the eXact family, and Bob Binder, one of our solution architects, who has worked on some unique implementations with our Ci63 handheld. I'm Robert Grotans, the Global Digital Learning Manager, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. I will also be controlling the slides for everyone, so please bear with me if I'm a little delayed in switching to the next slide. A few things to go over before we get started. Due to the number of people that are attending today's webinar, we will keep everyone muted. If you have any questions during this webinar, please use the questions function on the GoToWebinar panel, and we will have some time to answer your questions at the end. Finally, this webinar will be recorded, and you will receive a link so that you can review this webinar later. So to start things off, I am going to turn it over to Jeffrey.
Hi everyone, my name is Jeffrey Pystrak. I'm the product manager of the i1 family, and I'm here to introduce today the i1Pro 3 family of products, and they're going to help you profile and calibrate your devices, including monitors, printers, scanners, and projectors. So the i1Pro 3 family of products is useful in your workflow all the way from conception when we're creating art, all the way to production on digital devices. For the analog traditional press room, you're going to want to check out other devices such as the eXact that you'll hear about later in this presentation. Next slide. So why calibrate or profile to begin with? Well, profiling and calibration helps you get the most accurate, reproducible, and pleasing color on your devices. Unlock the best possible performance in your printers, scanners, monitors, and projectors. And that's a story that's important for proofing, both hard proofing on paper if you're using a proofing printer, and soft proofing on a monitor to just see the accurate colors on your screen. And there's other applications as well in photography and videography work. Essentially, if you need to have accurate, repeatable colors, then you're going to want to profile your devices. If you may have used one of our i1 instruments in the past and be comparing them, you might want to take another look at our i1Pro 3. So it includes a new long life LED source, so it's going to be accurate over the lifetime of the instrument. And with the i1Pro 3 family, you can scan M0, M1, and M2 all in one pass when it would take multiple passes with the previous generation of product. That's going to be a big time saver for your workflow over the earlier instruments. We've also added a brand new instrument to the family that I'm really excited about, the i1Pro 3 Plus. So the Plus has a larger aperture, and that allows us to accurately profile materials that were previously challenging or perhaps impossible. And we'll get into what some of those are later on. Next slide. As you would expect from the market-leading profiling tool, the i1Pro 3 connects to a wide range of other tools. And for the first one I want to mention is, of course, the software product that ships with the i1. It's i1 Profiler, and it's an easy-to-use bundled piece of software, and it's going to let you profile, calibrate, and QA the devices that I've mentioned. And if you love the flexibility of the i1 and you wish you could scan faster and in a more automated way, the i1 IO automated scanning table is a great accessory. You attach your existing i1 Pro 3 to the scanning table, and that could be the Plus large aperture or the standard aperture, and you let the robot do the work. It holds down the sample you're trying to read and automatically scans it, and it's faster and more accurate than doing it by hand. And you're not only limited to using i1 Profiler or X-Rite's sort of included tools. The i1 Pro 3 connects to a wide range of third-party products, including RIPs, DFEs, and other software, and more are being added all the time. Next slide. So if you're trying to decide which i1 Pro product is right for you, I can help guide that. And the first step to deciding which i1 Pro product is right for you is deciding between the standard aperture and the larger aperture plus device. And to do that, ask yourself whether you need to measure materials other than paper. If so, you're going to benefit from the plus device. So if you're measuring, for instance, backlit films, maybe textiles, other industrial materials, things with texture, reflectance. The large aperture plus devices are going to be a fantastic choice. If you're not, and you're primarily sticking to paper, you're going to have the best experience with the standard aperture device because the patches are smaller and you're going to measure more quickly. So after you've made that decision, plus or standard aperture, the next choice you're going to want to make is whether you're using the i1Pro profiler software or you're using a third-party product. If you're primarily using a third-party product, you might stick with the basic model and save some money. Or if you only want to profile your monitor and projector and you're not interested in profiling printers, then that's also a choice. Other than that, if you want the full experience to be able to do displays, projector profiling, CMYK printers, RGB printers, and scanners, the publish option is really the best choice. Okay. So I'd like to turn it over to Christian Benz next and conclude the I1 portion of the presentation. He's going to tell you a little bit about the eXact family of products.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Yes, my name is Christian Benz, and I'm the product manager for the eXact family at X-Rite. As Jeffrey mentioned before, he spoke about the i1 family, which is used in digital printing. The next two products, which I am and Bob will going to speak about, is more about instruments in press room, and I will focus on the instrument which is used in press room to measure paper and film substrates. The eXact is the market-leading handheld for these use cases, and it is used in different environments, in ink rooms, in quality control labs, and in print and packaging manufacturing facilities. Next slide. With the eXact, you can measure just standard process colors, CMYK, but you can also measure any spot color, Pantone colors, or whatever kind of color you have. The instrument provides all the data so that you can follow industry standards such as PSO or G7 or ISO and the Japan color. It's a high accurate color measurement instrument, and it can be used not only for single spot measurement. It has also a scan option so that you can scan a color bar manually, and there is also an option to add an automated scan capabilities for longer color bars. One of the features I like to mention here of the eXact is the best match tool, and the best match tool provides the operator kind of its a tool which speaks the language of himself, you know, because the operator may, if the operator gets a delta E number on the deviation, how far he is out of the target, he doesn't know how to adjust the press. But the best match function then tells him how much more or less ink he needs to give at the press so that he can get to the closest delta E for this target. Then also this instrument, the eXact provides it comes with the latest Pantone libraries, and as an option you can also have access to the Pantone Life database. To ensure that the instrument always measures accurate, the white tile is fully integrated in the instrument, and it is also protected. Next slide. As it is a market-leading product, it is also integrated with many different solutions. The instrument is shipping with the solutions I have listed here on the left. The eXact Manager, it helps you to manage all the settings instrument. It allows also to build job templates or color libraries, whatever. You can fully control and manage the instrument from this software. Then there is also the data catcher software, which allows to transfer a measurement to an Excel file. So you can transfer an LED data or your density measurement to an Excel file and do your analysis there. Then the scan solution, if you have the instrument with the scan option, then and there is also the eXact data measure software included, which allows to review scan readings and also transfer those readings to an Excel file. Then optionally, you can use the instrument with a wide range of different solutions. I have listed here some of the X-Rite solution, for example, the color search solution which is a workflow solution from X-Rite. Then the IQC, our quality assurance software, the ink formulation software, the NetProfiler 3. I should mention this tool, which includes a color chart, allows to validate and profile your eXact anytime on site. So this helps you to ensure the instrument is working correctly, and if there is a problem, you can also profile it to bring it back to where it should measure. And then the eXact auto scan, as I mentioned before, this is an automated scanning track, which allows to scan color bars in offset printing. What is also important is that the eXact has a very high data correlation, so an intermodal agreement to the other spectrophotometers from X-Rite, like the i1, which was mentioned before by Jeffrey, or also the automated scanning solution offset Interlitrex 2. This helps you to, if you need to exchange data between different sites and departments. Next slide. The eXact product family consists of mainly 3 models. We have the eXact Basic, the Basic Plus, the Standard, and the Advanced. The Basic and the Basic Plus are densitometer models. They don't provide LB data or whatever, and are targeted at a smaller print shop. If you're just looking at density data or TVI or trapping, if you're interested on those data, then the Basic or the Basic Plus is the right instrument for you. If you run jobs according to G7 or PSO, if you have like to have the Pantone libraries in the instrument, then you should have the eXact Standard. If you need more advanced features, then you use the Advanced instrument. The Standard Advanced instrument, and they are also working with the NetProfiler solution. You can have their scan upgrade, which allows you to manually scan a color bar, or you can have, as I mentioned before, the auto scan option to automatically scan the target. Then all these models, the 4 models I mentioned here, they are also available as XP configuration, which helps you to accurately measure on flexible film materials. Next slide. And moving now to Bob Binder, and he will speak about the Sphere instrument.
Great. Thank you very much, Christian. Welcome, everyone. My name is Bob Binder. I'm a solution architect, and I work specifically with print and packaging accounts. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is the Ci64, which is a spherical device and used for some very specific applications within printing. I will start out by mentioning that in most cases, the appropriate device when measuring in a print workflow is the eXact device, which Christian just spoke to you about. There's a couple of cases which I'm going to talk about where the eXact is not the best choice, and you will be better served with an instrument which is of a spherical geometry, which is the Ci64. And we're going to talk about that here over the next couple of minutes. When you're using a Ci64 in your workflow, you can use it at all stages. So it can be used for ink formulation, It can be used on press for controlling production, as well as in your quality assurance lab. So next slide, please. I thought I would start out by showing you an illustration of the two different device geometries. And so what we're looking at here is a cross section of the way that these two devices capture color that we're measuring. So the illustration on the left, which is labeled 45-0 geometry, also known as a single angle device, is the way that the eXact works. It's also the way that the i1Pro works. And so basically the way that this device captures the reflected light from what we're measuring is the lamps in the device are positioned at a 45-degree angle to the surface we're measuring. That light reflects off of the surface we're measuring at a 0-degree angle directly straight up to the optics within the instrument that are measuring the color. And that's why it's known as a 45-0 degree, is it's following the path of the light. For most cases, this works out really well. The two cases where it does not work out very well is if we're measuring something that has a mirror-like surface. So for example, if we're printing transparent ink directly onto a foil surface with no white ink underneath it, that is very reflective, just like a mirror, and that's why we call it a mirror-like surface. So what happens in those cases, the light that's reflecting off of that surface at a 45-degree angle, most of that light is going to reflect off at 45 degrees the opposite direction. So very little light is reflected back up to the optics. And if we are printing on foil with a transparent ink, I mean, it makes a surface which looks very nice to us as a human, but to the instrument, since very, very little light is being reflected back up to the optics, the instrument, such as an eXact, will basically see that as black. And of course, that does not help us at all. The other situation where we can run into an issue, and it's pretty uncommon in printing, but if we're printing on a surface that is textured, it's not perfectly smooth, what can happen, because the light is a point light, as it hits the different hills and the different valleys in that surface, the light can reflect off at different angles. So we will tend to get inconsistent measurements. Now, we typically don't print on textured surfaces simply because it's very difficult to print on a textured surface. So this tends to be a little bit more rare, but there are some cases where that happens. If you look at the two illustrations on the right side of this slide, this is showing the optics in a spherical device like the Ci64. This is known as a spherical geometry device, sometimes also referred to as D8. And in a D8, the D stands for diffuse, and the 8, you'll notice a degree sign, that's also referring to the light. And in the case of a spherical device, we're actually measuring 8 degrees off center. The way that this instrument illuminates the surface that we're measuring is we're actually measuring inside of a sphere, and the sphere is coated on the inside with a material that's very white, very neutral, meaning it's going to reflect wavelengths of light equally throughout the visible spectrum, and it's very reflective. So our light source, you'll see in these illustrations, is positioned on the side of this sphere. The light enters the sphere. You'll also notice that we're showing a little baffle or a little flat piece of this material directly below the lamp. And the reason we do that is so that the lamp is not shining directly onto the surface we're measuring. but the light is simply entering the sphere, and the light begins bouncing around inside of this sphere. And so what we're doing, in essence, is illuminating that surface that we're measuring from every possible angle because of the way that the light is bouncing around. And then our optics are positioned, as you see here, 8 degrees off center. And so that light that's being reflected off the surface that we're measuring enters our optics, and we can then take a measurement. I'm not going to go into too much detail about specular included and specular excluded because it's kind of outside the realm of what we've got time for here today. But I will just mention that with the spherical device, we have the ability to take 2 different types of readings. One is called specular included, which is the left-hand illustration of these two, and the other is specular excluded, which is the one on the right-hand side. And you'll notice the difference between these 2 drawings. On the right-hand side, we have a port that can be opened and closed. And when we open that port, you can see that dashed line. Some of the light is being allowed to escape out of the port. The reason for this is that if we as a human look at an object like a glossy magazine, and the angle between the magazine and our eyes is the same as the angle between the magazine and the light that's illuminating it, we're going to see a big gloss reflection. And that reflection is called the specular gloss. And as humans, we compensate for that by tilting the magazine at a different angle. And then we don't see that specular gloss entering our eyes. This is in essence what that port does, is it is allowing that gloss to escape. So we can either include that gloss or we can exclude that gloss. A technical point, the 45°0 geometry, like the eXact, that isn't a specular excluded device. In that case, any specular reflection is reflecting off at 45 degrees. And so all of the data that we get from a single angle device is specular excluded. And so what happens with this, if we're measuring something that's very reflective, like transparent ink on foil, we don't have the problem like we do with the single angle because we're capturing all of that reflected light inside of the sphere. So we're able to accurately measure it. Also, if we're measuring something with a texture to it, again, because we're illuminating it from every possible angle, we're going to totally capture all of that reflected light and be able to measure it. So now you might be wondering, why is the eXact the preferred instrument? And I mention this because I've had a number of people ask me this. Why don't we just use the spherical geometry for everything? And there's actually a number of reasons for that, or at least several. One of them is that the single angle geometry of the eXact does a better job of replicating the way that we see the color as a human. And of course, that's very important to us. It's one of the challenges we have as an instrument manufacturer, is making devices that see color the same way that we do as humans. And if we think about this, the eXact replicates the way that we see color. As a human, we simply look at anything from a single angle. We don't have the ability to see a device from all angles at the same time. So we're going to get better agreement between human vision and the instrument measurement using an eXact. So that's a huge reason that we want to use the eXact anytime that we can. Another reason is aperture size. With a spherical device, just because of the way this works, that opening in the sphere has to be big enough to get a good data out of it. So typically a spherical device will have a larger geometry than what we're able to do with a 45-degree angle 45-0 angle device. And that's of course important to us when we're printing. And I don't need to tell you guys that real estate is very important, and we like to have the smallest measurement area as possible. And then another reason, if we're only measuring solids, you know, the spherical device is fine for those cases. But if we're going beyond that, which we typically are, and measuring other attributes such as dot area, overprint, gray balance, all of those other metrics, the standards for those are all set up specifying a single angle geometry. So while the spherical device is good in some cases for measuring solids, it may not be the best for measuring beyond solids. So next slide, please. Okay, so just to kind of reiterate these, where it would make sense to use a spherical device or our Ci64, if we're measuring transparent ink printed directly onto metal surfaces like laminated foil or metal deco, it's the appropriate device. And let me mention another thing here, because I can anticipate the question. Many people will ask, well, what about metallic inks? And what I will say about that is that in most cases, we find that with metallic ink, and now I'm talking about metallic ink printed on paper or board, not on a foil surface, the eXact will yield good measurement. And the metallic ink is generally not a mirror-like surface, such as when we're printing on foil. And we've done studies, in fact, we have a white paper about this. What we found is that when measuring metallic ink on paper, again, the eXact will give better correlation to the way that we as humans see that color. So if we were looking at something like an orange color, what we found in studies is that if the human observers look at a sample compared to a standard and say it looks slightly red, typically the eXact will give the same answer, whereas the Ci64 may or may not give the same answer. So we found, again, better correlation between the human observer and the instrument with the eXact in those cases. If it's transparent ink on foil, that is so reflective that the single angle device will just break down and not give good readings. So in that case, we're necessarily going to go to the Ci64. It also provides consistent readings when measured on texture surfaces. And again, it's hard to find examples of that in printing, but the example we've shown here, a foam cup, is one of those examples. So when we measure printed ink on something like this, you can get inconsistent readings. And again, because the light is reflecting off of that surface differently depending upon how the light strikes the beads in those cups. And now what I'm not talking about, if you can see here in these large letters, like where it says logo, there are some areas where we actually have voids in the printing. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about comparing a nice solid area to a nice solid area. With the single angle, we can still get some variation. And then the other thing that I mentioned was the aperture. Now, one benefit of the Ci64 is that we can get down to a 4mm aperture in the instrument. But even at that point, we still need to have a measurement patch that's at least 6.5mm big. And it's better if it's slightly bigger than that to allow a little bit of movement in the positioning. So it still requires a relatively large patch to measure. If we compare that to the eXact can go down as small as 1.5mm. So that's an advantage too. The other advantage, or one advantage of the switching aperture here in the Ci64 is you can switch back and forth. There's an actual physical switch that will allow you to switch between 4mm and 8mm. A lot of people like that to use the 4mm in the press room. but then have the option of a little bit larger aperture if they're measuring drawdowns in the ink room. Okay, so next slide. And just real quickly, I'm about finished here. All of our major software does support both the eXact and the Ci64. So packages like ColorCert QA Tools, IQC, IFS, which is our ink formulation software. They all support the Ci64 device. The Ci64, and I know I talked about it, but not in length. It measures both specular included and specular excluded simultaneously. And most of our software supports both of those modes in reading simultaneously. Christian mentioned Pantone Live, and the Ci64, of course, supports the Pantone Live libraries as well, including a relatively new library that we have specifically for metal deco. So those of you that might be in that industry, we now have Pantone Live dependent library for metal deco. And then lastly, we also have a variety of fixtures that are available for the Ci64. Most of them are designed for industrial applications. We have fixtures for measuring liquids and pellets and different things like that. But for the print and packaging field, we do have this device that you're seeing in this illustration, which is the cup and cylinder fixture. And basically the device sets on that platform on the top of the fixture, and then that arm that you see extending out, if you're printing things like cups, like the foam cup or a poly cup, or cylinders like, and for example, where this is used is like caulking tubes, or even smaller tubes for like makeup and toothpaste. You slip the cup or the cylinder or the tube over that arm, and it makes it very easy to take measurements without having to go to other extremes. Without this, what people oftentimes do is they're cutting the material, laying it out flat, and then measuring it. But not only is this time consuming, but there's always a risk that someone could cut themselves. So this just makes it very quick and easy to do those types of measurements. And so with that, I'm going to turn this back over to Robert, and we can wrap things up.
Perfect. Yep, thank you, Bob. Thanks, Jeffrey, and thank you, Christian. So we are actually right at time, but I do want to get a few questions answered. So if you do have any questions now, please feel free to submit those. And we'll try to take a few of them really quickly, and then we'll have to wrap up. While I wait for those questions to come in, I am going to launch a polling question. If you are interested in speaking to someone, I'm hoping this, there we go. If you are interested in speaking to someone, please feel free to answer this question and we can get you in touch with someone. And I will look through questions as they come in. So here's a question. Question about someone asking about Net Profiler. I don't know who wants to cover this one. What devices are supported? Is it just the eXact and Ci64? Is the i1Pro 3 supported? And maybe Jeffrey, you want to answer that?
The i1Pro 3 is not. Yeah, the i1Pro 3 is not supported by Net Profiler.
So okay, it'd just be the eXact and the Ci64.
And also kind of the IntelliTrax is also supported with Net Profiler, and yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's a good question. It just prompted me to think of something else, Robert. And Christian did a good job of talking about correlation between the eXact and the IntelliTrax and the i1Pro and legacy devices. I should mention as well that there's no correlation between a spherical device and a single angle device. So just so that's clear. So if you measure something with an eXact and look at the LAB values, and then you measure the same sample with the Ci64 and look at the LAB values, they will be different. In some cases, it might be substantially different. So there's just so no one's confused, there's no correlation between a spherical device and a single angle device.
Okay, let's see. Couple more questions here. So a question about profiling some, let's see, profiling photo canvas and very textured cotton rag photo papers. Would you use a plus for that, or would a standard aperture device work?
You could do it with either. However, I'd recommend the plus if that's a really common thing that you do. And there's a polarizer that's part of that can really help with those textured surfaces. It's an attachment, and the polarizer helps cut down the effect of that textured surface, and it's useful for those types of stocks. So the plus is a good choice. That's an important part of your workflow.
Okay, just going to take two more since we are over. One more I1 related question about measuring backlit applications. I think you mentioned this. Would you use a plus for that? And
that is
they
definitely
also ask what measurement mode. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, that's definitely a plus instrument, and it's any of the measurement modes, I believe. The way the workflow works is you measure, you characterize the light source that you're using. So you're going to want to put your material over a backlight. And what's clever about it is you don't have to use the same backlit that is going to go out and be displayed with. So for instance, if I'm making a backlit display for a mall, well, in my shop, I might not be measuring with that same instrument. And the workflow has a really great way of dealing with that, where you can separate those two things out. So yeah, you're going to want a plus instrument. And it's also compatible with the i1.io table as well now. So you can do your measurements by hand. You can use the i1.io table with backlit displays, and both of those workflows are available. But in order to do that, you're going to need the plus instrument.
Awesome. Okay, I'll take one more question. This one for Christian on the eXact, the best match functionality. Can that be used to find, I think this is more maybe clarification, can that be used to find the closest Pantone color as well as custom library colors?
Good question. Yeah, correct. Yeah, with the best match function, you can get to a Pantone color, or you can define your own targets. Whatever the color is. This can be more or less any spot color. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you, Christian. Thank you, Jeffrey, and thank you, Bob. We are definitely over time, so I will wrap it up here. We do hope you found this webinar useful. This is a bit different than we do most of our webinars, where we have 3 different presenters talking about our different products. So if we didn't get to your question, I will export those and I'll send them to the correct person that can probably answer that for you. Again, a link to this recording will be sent out, so you should receive that tomorrow. So I just want to say thanks everyone for joining today, and have a great rest of your day.